Hi there, this is Steve Spurrier. You can join University of Florida Hall of Famer Shane Matthews and also the two-time SEC Player of the Year every weekday as he brings you all you need to know about the Florida Gators, including news, analysis, opinions, and some of the biggest names in sports. You can find him on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Or you can watch him live at 8 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter.
Welcome to PodUp with Matthews in the Morning, coming to you from the International Diamond Center Studios with locations across the state of Florida and right here in Celebration Point in the heart of Gator Nation. I'm your host, Loren Meadows of the Lowdown with Loren Meadows, filling in for Shane Matthews today. And later on, well, right away, I guess, we'll be joined by Kevin Brockway of the Gainesville Sun to break down the NCAA tournament. Big news for the Florida Gator basketball team, Florida Pro Day, spring ball, and a new lady at the helm of Florida women's basketball. So with that, we bring in our guest, Kevin Brockway, brought to you by Comfort Temp. Comfort Temp Heating and Air is your #1 local HVAC company. Visit us at comforttemp.com. Comfort Temp Heating and Air. Comfort is our business. Peace of mind is our promise. How you doing, Mr. Brockway?
Good morning, Loren. It's a pleasure to be on with you. We always have a lot of fun. Always have a lot of fun with Shane, and this audience tends to give me a hard time, keep me on my toes. So it'll be it should be a fun-packed hour here.
Right? Yeah, man, no doubt. Absolutely. And a lot going on last night, man. I'm still in mourning a little bit. Just kind of came out of my shell a little bit. You can see my Final Four chair behind me. I thought I'd be making the trip to Indy, but things starting to take shape. Now the top 2 seeds in the South region, both Florida and Houston, have gone down. Last night you had Arizona taking care of Arkansas, who I think Arizona might be the best team in the country. Purdue beats Texas 79-77 out there in San Jose in the West region. And then Illinois takes care of Houston 65-55. And Iowa, once again, takes care of Nebraska 77-71. Anything stick out to you there, Kevin?
Well, the rise of the Big Ten, right? So you're gonna guarantee now to have a Big Ten team in the Final Four with Illinois and Iowa. Of course, Iowa beat Florida, and they followed that up with a pretty impressive comeback win over Nebraska. I mean, this guy, Ben McCollum, he can really coach.
Yeah.
Obviously was very successful at the Division II level at Missouri State, and then goes to Drake for a year, brings a lot of those players with him, and they're performing at the highest level. I mean, you got to give him his kudos, and certainly, disappointing end to Florida's season, what Iowa did, but maybe a little solace that if Iowa makes the Final Four, that they lost to a really good team, that this was not as much of an upset as a 1-9 was portrayed to be. And then the disappointment of Houston, too, Kelvin Sampson, you keep thinking it's going to be his year, and last year he loses, and he's got it all set up for him. He has the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight in Houston, and Brad Underwood, takes him out. Also, obviously disappointing night for the SEC with Texas losing to Purdue, Arkansas getting throttled by Arizona, who, as you say, and as I watched last night, that offense is just so high powered. The way they get up and down the floor, the way they move the basketball, the way they play in transition. They have been my national championship pick all along, and there's nothing that is telling me that that's going to be the wrong pick. I mean, Koa Pete looked tremendous again last night. He's a guy that the Florida fans remember from that season opener. He looked really good. So, yeah, I think that certainly, Loren, obviously, but you've got only 2 SEC teams left. You've got Alabama, as far as, team that could be knocked out. And certainly, let's see, what's the other one? It's escaping me right now off the top of my head. It's Tennessee.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yes,
yeah.
So you've got the Vols going as well against Iowa State. Rick Barnes, another guy that hasn't taken Tennessee to the promised land, to the Final Four. Could this be his year? I don't know, but if all four of these teams get knocked out in the Sweet 16, I'd say it's somewhat of a disappointing tournament for the SEC.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that. Somebody, let's see who, let's go back to Barone71 on the YouTube question brought to you by Quality Plumbing, residential and commercial plumbing services since 1984. Our name says it all. He says that Iowa-Illinois game is going to be a good game, very equal teams, but I feel the Illini have better athletes. I would say that too, but Iowa has kind of found a way to scrap, hang around against teams that are superior. I would say that, maybe not Nebraska, probably about even, but obviously the Gators a lot more athletic, were able to handle themselves inside. So it'll be an interesting game. Like you said, now the Big Ten guaranteed to have somebody in that Final Four. So, it'll definitely be interesting as things continue to shape out. But yeah, I mean, the SEC, Kevin, is interesting. You had kind of the prominence of the SEC making their way to the Final Four last year. And now, does this kind of signal, kind of the state of disappointment? Someone asked me, I was on Buddy's show a while back and asked me, what would be a disappointment or what would be a great season. I said, if the Gators basically made the Elite Eight, I thought it'd be a success. Things happen, you get to the second weekend, but to not make the second weekend, it's kind of a disappointment, I would say. Like you say, you left with Alabama, who I think they're not favored against Michigan, and then obviously Tennessee will be underdog against uh, Iowa State. So at this point, it's kind of I mean, I don't want to use the term disappointment, but definitely a different year than we saw last year, where we thought, okay, the SEC is starting to puff the chest out a little bit in basketball.
Yeah, 10 teams in, right? And it's interesting. I mean, Texas made a nice run under Sean Miller. I thought, certainly as an 11 seed to go from a first four to where they got. But on the whole, I mean, Kentucky really, they needed that OA miracle shot, right, to beat Santa Clara. Then they get blown out by Iowa State. I was cautioning all along when fans were, certainly, and listen, Florida, the 12-game winning streak and winning the SEC regular season title is an accomplishment. You got to give them their props on that. But I was kind of cautioning to fans who said, "Oh, this is going to be a Final Four, win the national championship again." I said, "What if the SEC is not that good? Or what if it's not as strong as it was last year?" And I think that's proving out in the tournament for sure. That because they did this all against SEC competition as opposed to when they were a non-conference. Obviously, they took their lumps a little bit, and you kind of thought, maybe that was a case of some growing pains, and maybe it was a little bit in terms of the backcourt and the front court coming together. But I think it reared itself again in March. And, look, guys were nicked up, guys were beat up. I think people are trying to use Tommy Hawk's foot as an excuse at the end of the year and stuff and everything like that. Every team goes through that, kind of nicks and bruises. That there's no one that goes into the tournament fully fresh and fully healthy. I mean, it's the grind of the season. You got to have to navigate that. Last year, Alex Condon, right, went down with the ankle sprain in the Sweet 16 game and tried to come back and play at less than 100%. And they still had enough firepower to win the national title. I just think this team, ran into a little something at the end in terms of, a tough matchup in Iowa, certainly a team that was probably underseeded. And maybe just the confidence of losing in the SEC tournament to Vanderbilt, and maybe teams exposing and finding a little something on film on them that maybe wasn't seen during that stretch in February and March.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're with Kevin Brockway, the Gainesville Sun, brought to you by Comfort Temp. We want to thank Coach Spurrier for all that he does for the show. Wanted to mention that. Definitely, everybody knows how we all feel about Coach Spurrier. And I also want to remind the folks to follow us on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. You can listen to us on 39 digital platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many more. Kevin, so we talked about, coming back and how the Gators were able to come back last year. Got some information, got some news with some guys coming back this, I guess, to run it back, so to speak. Boogie Flan and Urban Cloudchar will both return for what will be their junior seasons, correct, for at the University of Florida. What do you expect from those two? What does that mean for the team? And have we heard anything else about what the plans of the other? For basically everybody can come back except Xavier Lee. But what are we hearing? What seems to be the NBA prospects? Obviously, Condon and Chinyelu tested the waters last year. Thomas Houck is, I think, at least going into the tournament, was considered a late lottery pick, possibly. So, what are we hearing about their plans? Obviously, you don't have to go now because you got some money that you can work with here at the college level. But what are they thinking?
Well, I know behind the scenes they're really trying to bring Chinyelu and Condon back. I don't know if they feel they can get Houck back based on his status because he has potential to be a lottery pick. But Chinyelu and Condon are two guys that if they can get back, they'd feel really good about next season. And I was told that they were trying to get Boogie back too, and they did. And Clavshar. And by the way, Clavshar is a senior in eligibility. He came in as a sophomore because he came in from overseas.
Okay.
And I think that's how they worked that out in terms of his eligibility status. So, but
so
yeah,
he'll be a senior next year.
Yeah, he'll be a senior next year.
Okay.
Boogie will be a junior next year. Isaiah Brown is probably coming back. He'll be a junior next year. I thought he was really on the come second half of the season. And I love his athleticism. He needs to continue to refine his skills a little bit. And obviously, he missed a free throw at the end and took a little bit of the brunt of that. But I think he has potential to be a really good scoring guard in this league. People are saying that you have to go out and get a scoring guard, and maybe do, but I think you can develop Isaiah Brown into a scoring guard. I mean, I think this kid has got a lot of upside, a lot of potential. And his brother, AJ Brown from, Ohio, the transfer that sat out last year because of the labrum surgery. I mean, he's another guy that's a shooter. And if they can get him healthy, that's another backcourt piece. I think that, Alex Lloyd, and then you got CJ Ingram on the wing, who I think showed a little bit at the end of his freshman season that he'll be capable of contributing more next year. So I think you got some guys. And Jones Lay is a 7-footer. They're bringing in as a freshman. And we'll see about Handlogden too, and if he can get the extra year. And obviously, Olivier is still a project. But if you can ever figure something, if anything can ever figure out with him, I mean, that would be, fascinating for sure. But I think they've, like I said, I'm sure Todd will go into the portal and his staff and will fill whatever holes they feel like they need to fill. He's done a good job the last few years of just sprinkling it in. I think he likes to have a core, and I think having a core is important, still. I mean, you take a look at what Purdue has done with Trey Kaufman-Renn and Fletcher Lawyer and Smith. I mean, that's a core. That's a group that's been together for a few years. They're going to the Elite Eight. I think continuity still matters to a degree. And, you don't want to, completely gut your roster and do it every season, overhaul it every season. But I do think that, he'll sprinkle in a guy or two that could be an impact guy. And part of that will come down to resources. But I think part of that, too, is, Todd's pedigree now and this program's pedigree right now, that it's an attractive destination to come and to be, a player. And if Tommy Houck, say, is a lottery pick and, last year Walter Clayton is a first rounder, Todd could start to sell that too. Hey, look, you come here, we're developing you, we can get you to the next level. You can make a lot of money at the next level. I think that still can be a selling point. People talk about that in football, right? The Kirby discount or the Saban discount, maybe, but Todd can develop the golden discount in that regard.
Yeah, no doubt. Barone 71 on the YouTube question brought to you by Quality Plumbing says that Micah Handlogden is applying for an additional year,
yes.
But it hasn't been. Yeah. So is that's in the works as well?
It's in the works. I mean, we will see, by burning his red shirt last year and being part of the national championship team, he played in a lot of games. I mean, he played in about 16 or 17 games. I don't know how the NCAA is going to look at that. I mean, obviously it was tough to swallow what happened to him with compound fracture. But he did, recover from it a little quicker than expected and got back on the court. So we'll see how they handle that. I mean, the whole eligibility thing has been up and down, obviously, and in terms of getting years and not, they're trying to clamp down on it a little more. They don't want the 23 and the 24-year-olds in college basketball anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But this, at the same time, this isn't a case of a guy coming back from the G League. I mean, it was a legitimate, tough, crushing injury. So we will see if they take that into account, the NCAA, in terms of what Micah had to go through to get back.
Yeah, no doubt. And we want to thank Michael Snyder, attorney, UF grad. Michael Snyder, a real estate attorney, can help you save thousands of dollars in real estate commissions by helping you sell your home or land by owner without a broker. Michael Snyder, PLLC, serves the entire state of Florida. Contact Michael at Mike, M-A-S Schneider, M-A Schneider, PLLC.com. I want to talk about, and we can kind of unpack a couple things, but a little bit more news. So with this team, I mean, you look at, let's say that Chinyelu and Condon don't come back and they decide to test the waters, or just say, hey, if it doesn't work out in the NBA, we'll go overseas, we'll be pros, we'll start our adult lives, so to speak, and get moving. But I mean, in your eyes, I mean, and we could kind of put it to bed. I know you've been answering questions all week, but what went wrong? You started to see chinks in the armor a little bit, on the last game, I think the last regular season game against Kentucky, where to me they looked bored. So I thought, well, hey, they get into the tournament. Now it's tournament time. Let's get excited. Let's do some things. But it wasn't really that. And I mean, what do you think? I mean, if you had to point to something, Kevin, what was it? What was the thing? I mean, we all love Ty Golden, obviously. I think somebody mentioned they're still riding high from I think it's Concurrent 81. I don't want to it says Conjurin 3792 said he's still riding high from last year. So maybe that's enough. But what made this thing like just not, where this was a team that some people thought was the best team in the country, to not even make it past the first weekend? I mean, what do you think? Just what happened?
I don't know. People try to read into what goes on inside a locker room and so forth, and I get that to a degree, but I do think too some of the factors I mentioned. Listen, maybe they just ran into a bad matchup. They ran into a matchup where it was, certainly, like I said, you're riding high, but you're facing SEC competition. Let's not forget they won a lot of those big games at home too, but they were in Tampa too. So I mean, they had a home crowd there. It wasn't like they didn't. I do think that whatever could have been out of whack, maybe that game against Prairie View was a little too easy. And then you're coming in and you're kind of riding high and maybe a little overconfident in terms of, thinking that, you're just going to kind of show up on the court and bring, but Iowa brought the physicality to them. And I think it kind of threw them aback a little bit, because I don't think they thought that coming out on the court, because they were the bigger team size wise, they were going to be the more physical team. And that was not the case.
Mm-hmm.
But you look back to the Vandy game, the 3-point line was a big problem there, certainly. Turnovers, taking care of the basketball was a big problem there. And, the other thing too, Loren, is 2-5 in games decided by 5 points less, not having that finisher, not having that guy at the end of the game, where Walter Clayton was such a luxury in that
Good
regard.
point.
His
Great
ability
point.
to make big shots. It just never developed, and Boogie tried, and he hit some big, he hit that one big shot against Duke, but then he, obviously had the mistake against UConn. So it was like trying to look for a guy you could trust there at the end. You give the ball to Xavier Lee at the end of the game, there's 4.5 seconds left. He, the clock in his head, it just doesn't work out. He tries to dump it off to Houck, but there's not enough time, and Houck fumbles it. You got to get a shot on the rim there. So I think that end of game situation, when you get in a tight game, they were blowing so many teams out in SEC play, that the whole tight game scenario just never really, whereas, last year, I mean, so many comebacks, so many finding ways to win close games. But they had a defensive stop at the end of the Houston game. People forget that. And this was probably a better defensive team, but Todd didn't trust him to get the stop at the end of the game. Instead, he tried to foul and, create a 3-on-2 situation. So there was a lot into it, I think, playing and coaching wise, where they just, in those close games and in those tight moments at the end of the games, they just didn't have the moxie to pull it through.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is kind of funny. John Brock coming to you with the Facebook question live, brought to you by Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law firm partner of the Florida Gators. John Brock said, if you got TJ Finley playing college football, surely Handlogging can get one more year. So, so that's kind of, it's amazing that TJ Finley is still playing. Started his career at LSU, which kind of brings us to another question. So Will Wade returning to LSU. I mean, unbelievable. And Brock adds, brought to again on the Facebook question, brought to you by Meldon Law. Is there two slimier coaches at one school than what LSU has? So, I mean, do you know much about that? I mean, that's amazing. I mean, disaster at LSU.
McMahon, yeah. I mean, the whole thing was just, listen, they want to win. And McMahon was a big disappointment. Let's put it that way. I mean, there was no two ways about it. And they feel like Will Wade is the guy that can bring the program back a little bit. But there's a way to go about it. And I mean, from his denial a couple of weeks ago when he was at NC State, but Will Wade didn't seem like a good fit at NC State. And he's more of an SEC coach than an ACC coach, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? He's a backroom dealer, and obviously he was. I mean, now it's above board, but I do think that the culture shift, to go to a school, ACC school like that, where you're in the triangle and listen, that is a hard job though, NC State, because you've got those two behemoth programs, Duke and North Carolina there. And it takes a special person, and maybe Will Wade felt like he wasn't getting the resources he needed, and he wanted to go somewhere else fresh. But 1 year, man, I mean, it's just, it was just like I said, and the way they went about it, the way they kind of tried to work behind the scenes, but they never really fired McMahon, right? And it was just slimy all the way around. It was it wasn't a good look for LSU either, to be honest with you. But they want to win, and they feel like Wade was the guy that had a proven track record there before. So I do find in these situations a lot. I could go all the way back to Billy Donovan, leaving 5 days for the Magic and coming back to I think the news cycle and time, and in a month this will be forgotten. You know what I mean? And he'll be on the rehabilitation tour, but. He's got a, he does have that pass that's, a little questionable. And one time I remember when I met him at SEC Media Days, he said, it's a winner's world. That was his line. That was, and that was when I got a first glimpse of Will Wade and what he was all about. He was just about, whatever he had to do to win and whatever he had to do to survive.
Right. And they had the kid, he brought the kid from Texas Tech, remind me of his name. They kind of gave Florida fits last year. So Williams Williams. Yeah. So could we see, and he's got one more year, correct?
He's got one more year.
So he could end up on this would be his third or fourth school. He could, if he follows Will. I know he and Will Wade had a pretty decent relationship. He kind of took a step back under Will Wade. I didn't think he was the same player that he was at Texas Tech. I know he dealt with some injuries a little bit, but could we possibly see him then follow Wade to LSU and be in the
sure,
SEC?
Man. I mean, that's the way this works. I mean, McCollum took 6 of his guys from Drake, and look at what they are. People, the coaches bring who they trust, and who they feel can fit into their system. And I mean, certainly we've seen that in football, right, with Buster Faulkner and Aaron Philo, and Bailey Stockton and Harrison Moore and so forth and everything. So that's the way it kind of works now. I think is that. The coaches now in this transfer portal era, player movement, they go with the coaches that know them.
Yeah, no doubt. Let me, I just want to touch on a couple of things. We'll talk about one more coaching job that I think a lot of people have their eyes on, but I want to mention Titan MRI and Imaging. Usually we have the Titan MRI text line, but today we just want to shout out Titan MRI for all they do. Titan MRI and Imaging. It's your choice. And Scott, 0020, brought to you by on the YouTube question brought to you by Quality Plumbing. Ask Billy D to UNC. I mean, what's the deal you think, Kevin, on that UNC job? Is that something that Billy D would come back? He's I think I think Chicago's in the playoffs right now, or right there in the play-in.
Not really. You'd be
They're not
surprised.
okay.
They're not doing too well. They're 28
Okay.
and 41 right
Okay.
now.
Well,
I
maybe
mean,
not then. I thought they were at one time.
they kind of gutted the roster at the trade
Okay.
deadline. So I will say this: despite that record, the Reinsdorfs believe in Billy Donovan. I mean,
Okay.
basically, like he's a guy that I'm looking at this up now, 29 and 43. But it's interesting because last year they could have let Billy go to the Knicks, which is his dream job. Like if you ever been in Billy Donovan's office, the first thing you see, you look to your left, there's this big framed picture of him playing for the Knicks, and he grew up going to games in Madison Square Garden in the 1970s. The Bulls would not let the Knicks talk to him. And this was after, a few years of, him being in the playing round, but Billy's always been a good soldier there. He hasn't complained when they've gutted or the roster or they've done things there because of their limited resources. So I think that, Matt McCall, he was on the Field of 68 podcast. He was one of Billy's former assistants, and he talked about Billy's loyalty. And he said he's not going to walk away from a contract. And maybe, that, and he said, hey, look, maybe that's to his fault sometimes because he's probably had some other opportunities in the past. Indiana is a school I know that had interest in him. Certainly Kentucky kind of kicked the tires after Calipari left. Texas last year, I think, had a little interest in him before he went to Sean Miller. But I think he likes the NBA game. He always, when he left 11 years ago, he said, the thing he liked about NBA is it's strictly basketball. I think coming back to the game now with the NIL and the transfer portal era, I don't know how well he would adapt to it. He likes to coach hard. He doesn't like to coddle people. And it's a little bit of a different era in that regard. So I think that would be, I'm not saying it would never happen. And I, there have been some reports that he has, that he'll listen, but I think he likes the pro game. And I think he'll stay in the pro game as long as he's allowed to stay in the pro game, as long as they'll let him. It's been a tremendously, tragic year for him, losing his father last month. He lost his mother-in-law. His mother just had her leg amputated due to a circulation issue a few months ago. So it's been a very hard year for the Donovan family. And, knowing them the way I do, you certainly send your prayers out because they were good people. They've done a lot for this community. I think we've talked off air about the St. Francis School in Gainesville. They were very instrumental in getting that Catholic school built here. They did a lot in their years here in Gainesville, and you'd like to see success for him. You'd like to see him happy either way, whatever decision he makes. But my opinion is I think he wants to see the NBA through for as long as he can.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, I mean, a family that's just dealt with a lot of tragedy and unfortunate circumstances over the years. But yeah, Billy Donovan stays, of course. The Bulls are currently 10 games out of the play-in. So yeah, it'll be a different direction for the Bulls. But like you said, if the Reinsdorfs are in his corner and want to keep him around, then that kind of certainly lends itself to that. But yeah, I mean, and I was that's crazy that I wasn't aware. I live not far from St. Francis. I wasn't aware of you. You kind of enlightened me on his, guess contribution to that school and its development and building and things like that. So that's just another feather in his cap, and always been. You and I both are old enough to remember him playing in the Final Four at Providence. I remember that vividly. Obviously, you spent some time in Bloomington. That was the last championship for Indiana, but that was the year they had Syracuse, Providence, UNLV, and obviously Indiana.
And how about that? Rick Pitino's still kicking around. He's got
still rolling. Yeah, I mean, that's crazy, man. Still doing his thing. Shout out to Coach Pitino. But Miapa Latin Cafe. Miapa is proud to sponsor Gator Athletics. at all Gator baseball home games. When the Gators win, you win a free cup of Cuban coffee from any Miapa location. Just show your ticket. Go Gators, go Miapa. And Miapa's always front and center. I guess it's in the second half when you go to shoot free throws. If the opposing team misses two, you get free empanadas. So it's always nice to see the students go crazy for those empanadas. But we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Kevin Brockway. You're listening to PodUp with Matthews in the morning.
Our premium sponsors are Atlantic Roofing, Campus USA Credit Union, International Diamond Center, J.F. Hayden's Craft Liqueurs, Los Landeros Tequila, Meldon Law, Titan MRI and Imaging, Castaway Sauce, UF Health Orthopedics, Michael Snyder PLLC, Florida Legends Gala and Experience, South State Bank. Gridiron sponsors are Baker Sports, Florida Cracker Oyster, Electronics World, Gallo Car Wash, Miapa Latin Cafe, Peachland Dental, Quality Plumbing, Ruse Ogre State Farm, Silverback Concrete, 84 Lumber, Big Mills Cheesesteaks, Celebrate Primary Care, Gatorbait Media, Florida Cracker Kitchen, Gator Dominoes, Ironwood Golf Course, McDonald's of Gainesville, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, UF Bookstores, International Gold and Diamond Exchange, Advocare, MGNA Wealth, Comfort Temp. Watch and listen to us live on Facebook or YouTube. Listen to podcasts wherever on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And to advertise, be sure to call my man Freddie at 352-284-3733.
By now, you heard about the Florida Legends Experience in Gala, featuring Gator Heisman greats Tim Tebow, Danny Warfel, and Steve Spurrier, all in one place at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. Imagine catching a pass or taking a handoff from a Heisman winner, all while supporting Isaiah 117 to help provide safe, loving homes for children in need. Then enjoy an unforgettable evening at the Gala, filled with great food and lasting memories. Don't miss this historic event. Find out how you and your business can get involved at FLLegends.com. That's FLLegends.com.
What's up, everyone? I'm Mike Pouncey, and this is my twin brother Marquise Pouncey, and this is Life After Football.
Let's go. We are the owners of Tropical Distillery, and JF Hayden's is our liqueur brand.
We have 5 different flavors: a mango, a lychee, an espresso, citrus, and key lime pie. We pride ourselves on not only being a Florida-made brand, but also a cocktail solution. With that being said, cheers
And go Gators.
Hi there, this is Coach Steve Spurrier, and I want to let you know that by popular demand, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill's delicious brunch is now served in a premium buffet. You have spoken, we have listened, and we're now serving Gainesville's only elevated buffet, complete with an omelet station, ginger sage chicken sausage, shredded short rib, plus you can enjoy bottomless mimosas and Bloody Marys. So join us every Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3 for the best brunch in town.
And we're back. PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Loren Meadows filling in for Shane Matthews here with Kevin Brockway of the Gainesville Sun. We're brought to you by the International Diamond Center Studios, with locations across the state of Florida and right here in Celebration Point in the heart of Gator Nation. International Diamond Center for all your jewelry needs. So, Kevin, let's talk about it a little bit. Well, I want to give a thanks to Alan. It says, it looks like it says Alan Fested or Fsted. I want to thank you. He said he tuned in late, and we got the A team. So appreciate those kind words, man. So Alan comes to you with the quality plumbing live question. Quality plumbing, residential, commercial plumbing services since 1984. Our name says it all. So, pro day yesterday. Talk a little football. Let's get to it. Up and down performances, Kevin. From what I understand, I was not able to make it. This was actually the first pro day that I had missed in 3 years. Duty called, but last year was a little bit more. You had guys that like Graham Mertz and others that were able to participate. The year before, kind of a lackluster pro day, and it seems like for the second year out of three, unfortunately, pro day was kind of just not any
Yeah.
great performances from what I understand. Go ahead and give us the your thoughts on what you observed yesterday at the pro day.
Well, I think, certainly it would have been a little more exciting had Caleb Banks been healthy, but give the guy credit for coming back. He's on a scooter with his, foot up. He, re-breaks his foot during the combine. I mean, he told us basically that he broke his foot the night before the combine, and then he went out and he ran a 5.1 or a 5.04 in the 40, which, for a 6'6", 330-pound defensive lineman, a defensive tackle, it's not bad. Doing that on a broken foot, right? He but he was very gracious and humble and talking to us. He didn't have to talk to us, and he did. He still feels like his draft stock is going to be okay. Certainly, he was treading upward, I think, as a first rounder, right? And then maybe the injury set him back a little, but I'm still seeing on a lot of mock drafts, second round. I saw one that had the Indianapolis Colts at 47. But as far as the players that were healthy and took part in it, George Gums did 22 reps on the bench press, 225, which, for an edge rusher is decent. And Jake Slaughter did 22 in a row. Devin Moore, vertical leap, 34.5, and ran a 4.59 in the 40. But, he's coming off groin surgery and he'd like to get that down. But he feels like, but, he's another guy too, tall, rangy corner. I still think we'll probably, go third, fourth, maybe fifth round. And so there'll be guys that'll be drafted in this class, not very high, but, no first rounders, but you could have a bevy. I mean, Jake Slaughter, All-American, second, third round pick. Austin Barber, is a guy that, he's a tackle and, he had his issues in pass protection, but he's a very good run blocker.
How'd he do, Kevin? I didn't mean to cut you off. What was he
really didn't really do much though.
Okay.
He just kind of met with teams and talked with
Okay.
scouts. He didn't bench press, so I think he felt like he did enough in the combine. But he's another guy too that third, fourth, fifth round guy, because I think he projects more as a right tackle, right at the next level, because he's a very good run blocking tackle. But I guess he had an elbow issue last year too that maybe impacted his pass blocking a little bit, but we know he can block the run, and I think there's value in that in the NFL, and he's got the body for it. So if you guys like, some guys took part in drills, some guys didn't. As I mentioned, Austin Barber really didn't do much, but all in all, it was Trey Smack obviously is a guy. Rocco Underwood, I believe, looked pretty good. I mean, he benched 16 times and ran a decent 40 times. So he's trying to raise his stock as well as a long snapper.
That's good. Yeah. Loren Meadows filling in for Shane Matthews today on PodUp, brought to you by the International Diamond Center. And we're here in the studio, sponsored by that group. Locations all over all over the state of Florida and right here in Celebration Point in the heart of Gator Nation. Let's see. Andy McIntosh, both baseball and softball go to Fayetteville. And I know the answer to this question, but he said, will baseball and softball take the same plane to Fayetteville, or will they waste fuel and take two planes? The answer is they wasted fuel, Andy. Unfortunately, Andy, this question comes from the Facebook Live question brought to you by Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law firm partner of the Florida Gators. Yeah, Andy, they took two separate planes. I think they actually even left at two totally different times. But it was Jersey Day for the softball team. I don't know if people follow on Instagram, but everybody had their little jerseys and things like that. So it was pretty cool. Jocelyn Erickson had on a USA hockey jersey. So that was kind of cool and everything. But yeah, so that was, so to answer your question, Andy, they took two separate planes.
Tim Walton wasn't very happy that Stetson win. What, he didn't talk to the media afterwards, or
no? Yeah. I mean, he stays after him, But and interesting, you talk about in sports, and I know we'll get back to football here in a minute, but you talk about in sports, Kevin, and one thing I like about this softball team, not a big roster, 17 to 18 girls, Ava Brown's down for the foreseeable future. But, they had, people came in, Allison Sparkman came in, gave them some innings, really calmed everything down. I think Red Oxley struggled a little bit early, so it was a close game. But, just being ready when your name is called. Olivia Miller did a really nice job against Tennessee, number one team in the country, pitched extremely well last Saturday. So, it's for as much as I know Tim wasn't necessarily pleased with the win, but you know how it goes. It's up and down year, man. And this is a long season, but to have some girls step up, particularly in that pitching staff that were able to kind of keep things under control. And it was 2-0 Stetson, but Stetson didn't score again, I think, after the second inning. So, some things to be proud of, and hopefully they can build on that when they get to Fayetteville this weekend. So, definitely some things out there. But Kevin, scrimmage, I think today for Florida, close scrimmage, but won't no media. Although we do want to give Summerall credit. I think he's been a lot more giving to the media than maybe the past regime. And like I said, we don't need to keep going over that, but giving a little bit more of access, ability to see team periods and things like that. So you've been able to see kind of the breakdown. Obviously, I was talking on Buddy's show. Obviously the most important position in sports is quarterback, particularly in football, things like that. But what are you seeing, and what have you seen this week? Are you starting to see improvements from this team? I know Summerall has said, we're not nearly where we need to be. Do they seem to be working towards that, or is it still kind of in the woods a little bit, in the weeds, and just still need to kind of fine tune some things?
Well, they came back from spring break, so I think it was sluggish Tuesday, but that's understandable after the week layoff. But I think overall direction where, you're seeing physicality, which is what he wants to instill. Quarterback competition. You keep hearing behind the scenes that Philo is doing better in, some of the team periods. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out, and I think that's going to extend into fall camp. I don't think that they're going to come to a decision, but the lights will, the first scrimmage will certainly, be yelling, and then they'll go on from there, and then obviously the orange and blue game, people will get a chance to actually see it in person. You hear a lot of good things about Buster's offense, in particular. How the ball doesn't touch the ground. A lot of short intermediate passes, working the ball down the field. The quarterbacks are accurate. So I think that's a promising sign. Eric Singleton is a guy, obviously a lot of speed, a lot of playmaking ability. Of the newcomers, he is the guy, I think, so far that has really popped. And so is Micah Mays, this kid from Wake Forest, has really, done a nice job. But Bailey Stockton too. I think a lot of the new ads at receiver are going to be intriguing. And, Dallas Wilson obviously has his foot issue still. Although he did dress on Tuesday fully, but then he went back in but he's a guy that I think they think if this were a game week, he would play, but there's depth at wide receiver. I think there's good depth there. And we know what Vernell Brown III can do. We know what VB3 can do. Certainly, you're going to have the running game with Jaden Baugh too. And, defensively, I think they're trying to, continue to pick things up. Aaron Childs has had a very good camp at linebacker. As far as being that physical guy, I think someone else said presence was felt right during tackling drills. And we'll see. And we'll see also, LJ McCray, another guy, has had a good camp so far at defensive end, a guy that needs to, and a guy with a ton of ability. Obadeju is starting to flash too a little bit too at defensive end. And he's a guy that they've been trying to get a little more physical too. Gerald Chapman's been in his ear. So it's been an interesting camp so far. And I think that they're going to continue to, try to hammer home the points that they want to hammer home, which is to make this team, physically and mentally tougher, which, hopefully they hope that by the time the fall rolls around, will serve them well in some of those games in the fourth quarter last year that they couldn't pull through in. Maybe this year they can pull through in a few more of those games.
Yeah, large fry gator, and I was kind of asked. He kind of read my mind. Large fry gator, brought to you on the YouTube question, brought to you by Quality Plumbing. Asked, "How's the back end of the defense looking?" He said we lost some people there, albeit mediocre players, but we lost some players there. How is that back end? I know that's one of the things that Brad Smith was able to really do a nice. They kind of did an umbrella look at Kentucky, kind of bend don't break in the back end, just some shit coverage, things like that. But have you heard or seen a bit?
Yeah, the guy they really like is Kanye Clark, another newcomer, the UCLA guy, in terms of like being a nickel. They love him a lot. Cormani's having a very good camp. And Dijon Johnson is, he got out of the orange jersey this week, so he's starting to go full go. And he's a guy that really wants to be a leader back there. And he's been through a lot, obviously, and went through a lot of off-season stuff. But I think, the safeties, Cam Dooley, Coleman, are both acquitting themselves well. You got Bryce Thornton back, and he's kind of a leader back there. So, I think they have some guys, and they really want more playmaking. They want more on-ball playmaking. Certainly interceptions, turnovers have been up and down. They got 2024. One of the reasons why that was Billy's best season. They got turnovers that year, but they couldn't carry it over to 2025, and so important to be able to make plays on the ball, affect the ball. And that's what Brandon Harris is trying to instill. The cornerbacks coach is being able to make plays on the ball, certainly. And, and Chris Collins, the safeties coach. And, I think certainly, guys like kind of Clark and Coleman and Cam Dooley are going to be three nice additions there in terms of, being able to people and make some plays.
Teams, anything stand out special teams wise, or we'll have a new kicker,
they work a lot on it, and we go out there and they're always working on punt drills, punt return drills. Obviously, VB3 is going to be doing the returns, but they're trying Lloyd back there as well. Evan Pryor, the running back from Cincinnati, has been returning kicks a little bit. Durkin has been, solid kicking the ball. Clark looks like a really good punter. He's got some nice hang time, and he booms it. Certainly, Crawshaw obviously was a big weapon, a few years ago. And then, Doman last year's transfer was kind of so kind of up and down. But this kid Clark looks like he can really flip the field a little bit. So he's going to be an interesting addition.
No doubt. You hear me say it all the time. Special teams are special for sure. So you got to be on
I
top
haven't
of
had
it.
a kick return here since 2020. Punt or kick return for a touchdown, which amazes me. The athletes that Florida has. And I know it's harder, particularly the kick returns. But, you're still seeing guys like Barry Brown. When he was at Kentucky, he did it. You can find a guy that does it. That's a huge momentum play. You get a punt return, you get a kick return. You block a punt last year, the Texas game. They don't win that Texas game last year if they don't block that punt. Right?
Yeah. Was it like over 70% of teams that block a punt win a football game? So
yeah,
that's you gotta be on top of that. Florida Cracker Oyster Bar and Grill is the ultimate spot for seafood and more. No matter the occasion, they're ready to welcome you. Florida Cracker style. Check them out in Keystone Heights. Florida Cracker Oyster. Castaway Hot Sauce. Castaway Hot Sauce. Try their signature ball kicker hot sauce inspired by the HBC Steve Spurrier and his famous kick in 1966. Castaway Hot Sauce. And then we want to shout out Peachland Dentistry, who is the sponsor of JC and the QB Weekend Picks. We won't have any picks, but we are going to put Kevin on the spot here for about the last 5 or 6 minutes. Give us the SEC picks. We got Tennessee, Iowa State, and we got Alabama, Michigan. Kevin, give us some picks. Who we got in those two games?
I'll take Michigan over Alabama for sure. Tennessee might be able to beat Iowa State if Jefferson's not playing. So I'll go with Rick Barnes as being like the last SEC team standing. That would be kind of apropos, and for him to have his heart broken in the Elite Eight again as he has so many times.
No doubt. Absolutely. Appreciate that, Kevin. And lastly, John Brock, coming to you from the Facebook question live. Read brought to you by Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law firm partner of the Florida Gators. New women's coach, Tammy Reese, will take over the Florida Gators. Got about 5 minutes left. I love the hire. Obviously, we've had Kelly Ray Finley on this show with Shane, with myself. Obviously, I consider Kelly Ray Finley a friend. She was a trusted confidant both ways. So, very, very dear friend. Sorry to see Kelly go, but if we were going to go in a direction, I really like the hire of Tammy Reese, someone who has pedigree as a player and a coach, worked under legendary coach Debbie Ryan, 3 Final Fours, 3-time All-American, obviously extremely close with Don Staley, will have no trouble understanding the landscape. But what are we expecting from Tammy Reese, Kevin?
Well, what I like about her too is her charisma. I mean, she just took over that room in the press conference too. I mean, she was very impressive. A New York girl from the Catskills, and that's interesting too. It's not far from where I grew up in Rockland County, New York. So
Yeah.
and I asked her a little bit about those, and that's a place that's renowned for basketball camps. And she was talking about playing against the Hurleys and playing against Kenny Anderson and playing against the boys in those, big time Blue Star and Kathy Rush camps. So she's, got a little feisty streak to her. She's someone I think that, and she was a former actress too, right? She was in Joanna Man and Sister Sister. Owned a nightclub in Utah. She's had an interesting background. And I think that's part of what the women's basketball program needs. I mean, listen, the coaching is important too, and you got to win, but you also have to sell the program. And I think she's going to sell the program within the community. She's going to go out. She's going to try to get businesses involved. She's going to try to, raise a little money for NIL that they can supplement with their rev share, which, will certainly help in procuring talent. She seems to have that attribute about her. But the basketball side is important too. And she kind of grew at Rhode Island, right? 28-5. She's won 2 conference championships there. The SEC, as we know, is a different level. It's a different animal, and you do need resources. But she seems like the type of person that's going to be willing to try to raise those resources as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it's time. It's kind of funny. You get this and you see that, and it's kind of like when Florida hired Billy Donovan and things like that. I'm at least optimistic that this is the coach that can, in a lot of ways, not only put, I'm not going to say put Florida basketball on the map, but you wrote an article a couple weeks ago, kind of addressing the historical woes of this program. And I think this is somebody that has the confidence to, and not to say Kelly didn't, but has the confidence to step to the University of Florida and say, look, this is the most visible women's college sport. We are the University of Florida. She touched on it. We are the everything school, but yet we wallow in this one sport. They may never win the SEC. SEC's tough. They can make a Final Four before they make the SEC under Tammy Reese. I mean, that's how tough the SEC is. But is Florida ready to make the commitment? We got about a minute or so left. Are they ready to make the commitment, Kevin, to women's basketball, this basketball coach, and this new landscape with this prominent coach, this name at the helm?
Yeah, you talked to Scott Strickland about it, and he disputed some of my revenue support triggers. He was saying, well, we have charter airplanes that are owned by the school and so forth. But I think a little bit more needs to be poured in. He said he's not going to money whip it, but I think you got to raise it too, and you got to win to get the support. Todd did, I think, and the fruits will come. So I think it's going to be important for Tammy to, find that success on the court and build a program that's consistent and that's showing progress. All fan, I often say this: all you're entitled to as a fan base is progress. And certainly, the bar is set for Tammy to make progress, and I think she will. I'm pretty confident in her ability. I think that she's got something about her that she's going to attract players, and she's got the pedigree as a former WNBA player, and from the program in Virginia, where she's going to be able to make some strides here and build it up a little bit.
Good. Appreciate that, man. Good stuff, Kevin. And lastly, this day in sports brought to you by Campus USA Credit Union. Uh, brought to you where the proud member Steve Spurrier banks. In 1939, on this day, the University of Oregon beats Ohio State for the first NCAA title. Ohio State forward Jimmy Hull is named Tournament Most Outstanding Player, back when they used to give that award to the losing team sometime as well. So appreciate you guys.
Back then, or what was going on there?
Yeah, man. I think it might, probably at least wooden or something. I don't know. Probably played it outside. Who knows? But Kevin, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, at gatorsports.com, gainesville.com, and at Kevin Brockway G1 is where you can find my work. And Loren, it's always a pleasure to come out with you, buddy. We always have a good time. And
oh yeah, man, time flies, man. You know, always great stuff.
Always welcome to do it in the future.
Appreciate it, man. Well, thank you. We appreciate you all joining us on this Friday edition of PodUp with Matthews in the Morning. I'm Loren Meadows, host of The Lowdown with Loren Meadows. Catch me every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. He's Kevin Brockway of the Gainesville Sun. We'll see you guys next time. Appreciate you.